You've had a good day one. Nobody can argue with that. Let's talk about what happens next, though, with Airbus. You've launched the A321XLR today. That's tough news for Boeing. What else are you going to do that's going to make life tougher for Boeing?
Well, we're going to commercialize the plane. We started today. More will come with more customers moving forward. We believe it's a very good value proposition.
It was supposed to be a victory lap. The Paris Air Show, where the giants of aviation show off their wings, ended with Airbus locking down over $21 billion in new aircraft deals. Boeing, not one, not a single major commercial order. The company that once defined American excellence now watched from the sidelines. No headlines, no handshakes, just quiet, polite avoidance. It wasn't about pricing. It wasn't even about politics. It was about trust and how Boeing lost it. Buyers didn't forget the crashes. They didn't forget the delays, the silence, the arrogance, the empty promises. Because this collapse didn't happen overnight. It started years ago, when engineers were pushed aside by profit chasers, when warnings were ignored, when numbers became more important than lives. What happened in Paris wasn't a surprise. It was the final confirmation of a fall everyone saw coming. But here's what really happened, and why it matters more than you think. The warning signs were there, blinking red in internal memos, whispered in engineering meetings, flagged in simulator tests. But they were ignored. In October 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 plunged into the sea. Just 5 months later, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 met the same fate. 2 crashes, 346 lives gone. The culprit? A system called MCAS, software designed to push the plane's nose down to prevent a stall. But this wasn't a rogue line of code. It was a symptom. Boeing had removed the requirement for simulator training, withheld information from pilots, pressured the FAA to certify faster. One former Boeing engineer told the New York Times, "It felt like we were building airplanes to meet a schedule, not to meet a standard." The deeper truth? Boeing's leadership culture had shifted. Decades ago, engineers had veto power. Safety was sacred. But after a 1997 merger with McDonnell Douglas and years of Wall Street pressure, decisions moved from factories to boardrooms. The cost-cutting didn't stop with design. It infected oversight too. According to Reuters, the FAA had delegated key certification tasks to Boeing itself. Fox guarding the henhouse. This wasn't just regulatory failure. It was betrayal. Of passengers, of pilots, of every family who believed Made in America meant something. And as the headlines piled up, so did the silence from Boeing's top floors. But what happened next caught everyone off guard. The crisis didn't end with the crashes. That was just the beginning. Boeing promised change, new leadership, better oversight, safer planes. But what airlines got was waiting. In 2023, dozens of 737 MAX deliveries were halted due to misdrilled holes in the fuselage. Then again in early 2024, another stoppage, this time over missing fasteners. Each time, Boeing said the fix would be quick. Each time, it wasn't. Regulators dragged their feet, suppliers missed deadlines, and airlines were left with grounded planes and no answers. A senior procurement officer put it bluntly. "We don't need perfect, we need predictable." And Boeing isn't. The deeper problem wasn't one-off mistakes, it was volatility. According to Reuters, some airline executives began shifting future contracts away from Boeing altogether, not as a punishment, but as a precaution. Because in aviation, time is money. Reliability is value. And Boeing, once the gold standard of both, had become a gamble. This wasn't just a production issue. It was a crisis of confidence. And confidence, once lost, doesn't come back with a press release. But while Boeing faltered, its biggest rival saw opportunity in the silence. While Boeing scrambled to restore trust, Airbus was busy preparing for the future, one regulation at a time. Its A321XLR wasn't just another fuel-efficient plane. It was a statement. Extended range, lower emissions, ready for Europe's strictest carbon standards and the upcoming SAF quotas set to define the next decade. In 2025, while Boeing was troubleshooting production delays, Airbus quietly secured interest from forward-looking airlines. This wasn't about green slogans or ESG points. It was about long-term survival. Aviation is entering a new era, where emissions mean fines, where carbon footprints affect landing rights, where climate compliance determines fleet value. And Airbus saw it coming. According to Bloomberg, over 70% of new aircraft orders at the Paris Air Show included sustainability criteria. And guess who had a turnkey answer? While Boeing's offerings still raised questions, Airbus showed up with answers already certified. The result? Confidence, not just from climate-conscious nations, but from airlines hedging against the next regulatory shift. In a world chasing stability, Airbus made boring look like brilliance. But even as it captured the future, something unexpected was brewing in the East. The tariffs were meant to protect American manufacturing, a bold defense against China's rise. But in aerospace, that strategy backfired. As Washington and Beijing escalated trade tensions, Boeing found itself trapped. Key components became more expensive. Lead times stretched. And Chinese airlines, once Boeing's major clients, quietly backed away. Meanwhile, Airbus saw the storm coming and moved first. Instead of picking sides, it picked partners. It expanded joint ventures in China, sourced materials from India and Southeast Asia, and strengthened its EU supply lines. The result? Resilience. In 2024, while Boeing's logistics teams scrambled with tariff exemptions and customs backlogs, Airbus delivered aircraft on time and on budgets. Even the optics shifted. What looked like European caution turned out to be strategy. While Boeing testified in front of congressional panels, Airbus was signing bilateral agreements. Aviation insiders told Reuters, Boeing became politicized, Airbus became dependable. The bigger irony, America's push to weaken foreign competition ended up weakening its own champion. Nationalism turned inward, and Europe picked up the slack. But Boeing's challenges didn't end at borders. They were about to hit home, with the hardest blow of all. There was no dramatic announcement, no angry press release, just a quiet shift, one airline deal at a time. In 2025, Ryanair confirmed a $21 billion order with Airbus. LATAM followed, then several European low-cost carriers. Not because Airbus offered the cheapest jets, but because it offered predictability. Behind closed doors, airline executives were blunt. We can't wait for Boeing to sort itself out. This wasn't personal. It was operational. Airlines live and die on margins, on maintenance schedules, crew retraining, regulatory paperwork. And when a supplier becomes a variable, that uncertainty spreads through the entire system. Airbus understood that. It showed up on time, offered clear upgrade paths, met new emission standards, and stayed out of politics. That's what built trust. Boeing, once the gold standard, became the gamble. And the market doesn't like to gamble with 300-ton machines carrying hundreds of passengers across oceans. So the orders went elsewhere. And in that silence, the silence of deals not signed, hangars not filled, contracts not renewed, a message echoed across the industry. This isn't about forgiveness. It's about moving on. The decline didn't come with a bang. It came with silence, with empty order books, with missed deadlines, with engineers who no longer had a voice and buyers who no longer had faith. Boeing was never just a company. It was a symbol of precision, of courage, of what American industry could be when it led with purpose. But symbols are fragile, and somewhere along the line, what once stood for craftsmanship became shorthand for shortcuts, for press releases instead of performance, for confidence without the competence to back it up. That's not just a corporate failure. It's a cultural one, because Boeing's collapse is a mirror. It reflects what happens when the story of American greatness becomes more branding than belief. When trust once lost is treated as a PR problem instead of a wound to repair. The sky hasn't fallen, but the belief that we always lead has. And maybe the hardest truth is this: you don't need a crash to lose altitude. Sometimes, all it takes is forgetting what kept you in the air in the first place.